Powerfully Parenting Autism. Here is a personal story. Hello everybody. I have got a very special guest here today. We've got Katherine with us, Katherine Clothier.
Hello, how are you all?
We're so glad that you agreed to come along. That's so great. Did you have any hesitation when I asked you?
No, because I love speaking with you.
You go.
So I was like, this is another opportunity to have a chat. So
Well, I'll jump in. Let's do that.
let's do that. That's fun.
I've invited you along because you're a beautiful boy.
Yeah, he is beautiful.
Yes, he is beautiful. So we're here to talk about your experiences, your journey with your gorgeous son.
Yes.
How about we start off with just giving a bit of a background on how old he is, what the story is, and from the very beginning, if you don't mind, because I really want to tell your story so people out there can relate and jump in wherever they're at.
Yeah, that's great. I can start there.
It's a bit broad, isn't it?
No, it's not. We've only had 12 years on the planet, so we've only got a little bit to get through. But Jevington is 12.
Yeah.
So he's just getting to that stage where we're starting into a new adventure of the teenage years, which will be, I guess, another story in and of itself.
To be continued.
Definitely. But he has had an interesting history, and our deep dive into autism has been an interesting one. I come from a medical family, so and my background is in medical litigation, so I have quite a strong background in medical history. And when just before Jevington was 1, I started to become concerned about him developmentally. Unfortunately, I didn't have a strong marriage. Our marriage was sort of on the rocks by that stage anyway. And I kept going and saying to my husband, there's something going on.
Yeah.
And he was in the middle of doing his flight training, so he was kind of distracted by that. And I think he thought I was an over-worried young mother, which a lot of mothers, I suppose, do get.
Yeah, first child anxiety perhaps.
First child anxiety. And I think a lot of the time people think, oh, no, a first mother, she's going to be over-anxious and she's seeing things that she's not seeing. But the truth of the matter is that I was surrounded by other women with children. I was going to mothers' groups and things like that, and I was watching other children.
Watching him with his peers.
Very much so. And I started to notice some things that were concerning to me. Initially, Jevington had sort of followed his peers for a while, but then he seemed to do some things that really became disturbing for me in terms of I'd watch other babies and they'd want to interact with adults. Jevington didn't want to. So one of the first things I noticed was, other babies would coo at adults and try and make that eye contact and do all those sorts of... Yeah, very much so. And, that's a child's survival instincts kicking into play too. They need that connection with the adult. And Jevington wasn't doing that. Yeah.
What was he doing instead?
He was just blank.
Yes.
And really the only person he wanted to interact with at all was me.
Yeah, so it was quite expressionless.
It was, very much so. The other
was he an affectionate baby?
He was what people termed a needy baby.
Right.
But only for me. And he didn't sleep. So we actually went to Tresillian and tried to get on a sleep program because I had become somewhat of a sleep-deprived mess.
Well, effective form of torture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually couldn't get him to sleep either. So that was another thing. There was this significant sleep problem. Yeah. And then the major thing for me was his eyes. And this is going to sound like a very strange thing, but when I actually discussed it with Professor Atwood, he said to me, you notice the eyes.
So Professor Tony Atwood, everybody, is Queensland's famous man in the area of autism. We're very proud to have him, and he's just down the road, isn't he, in Brisbane?
And he's amazing.
And he's such a delightful character, isn't he?
Delightful human being. I call him the autism whisperer.
There you go. I've only met him once, and two times actually, and he's delightful. Okay, so
I must have seemed like a crazy woman because I noticed Jevington's eyes, like with a lot of children, and children have this vitality about them. There's a sparkle behind the eyes that we maybe see I think the most exciting of adults. A lot of adults lose that, but it's this sparkle that children
the wonderment.
have.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just very distinctive. And I noticed that Jevington had a very flat gaze, so a very one-dimensional flat gaze. And that was different to all of the other children around him.
Sure.
And I started to get really worried. One day, like a crazy woman, got out every photo I had of Jevington.
Yes.
And then every photo I had of him with his cousin. And I was going, there, to my husband, there, look. And he was saying, you're crazy. There's nothing there. And I'm like, no, look at his eyes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up ringing my dad, who is a paediatrician.
Handy,
very handy. Or has its moments of being handy, especially when he's a great paediatrician and you can't take your own child to him, really.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah, but I rang Dad, and at that time Dad was out practicing in the Alice, and I said to him, look, these are my concerns.
So people outside of Australia, that's Alice Springs.
Alice Springs.
Smack in the middle of Australia, that massive mountain.
Yeah, deep in the.
So he was stuck in the middle of the continent.
Yes,
right? Not really accessible.
Not easily accessible, and he said, "Come and bring Jeb."
Yes.
For a holiday, and
to Alice Springs.
Yes.
How to get a consultation?
Head to your father in Alice Springs. So I took Jev the next holiday that we were going on. I said, well, we're going to Alice to see Mum and Dad. And I took Jev out there, and Dad said, obviously I can't diagnose him. He's my own grandson, but I can have a look at him for the time that you're on holidays, and I can see if, you're doing the first time worried mum thing.
Sure.
Or there's something else going on. So Jevington wasn't yet 1 at this stage.
That's a very early stage for a mum to pick this up.
Yeah.
Absolute kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. It was, I think, I'd grown up around horses, and I know this is a very strange thing to say, but I spent so much of my life in the non-verbal world.
Yeah.
Where you have to watch and interact in a different way with a creature.
Yeah.
And you can't rely on being verbally told something.
No, you have to genuinely relate.
Yes, and you have to really watch what's going on. So you won't know your horse is injured unless you're watching. You won't know, if it's sick unless you're watching carefully. So I think that helped. I'm a real watcher.
Yeah.
And so we went out to Alice, and we spent 2 weeks out with Mum and Dad. And I could see my dad's a watcher as well. So
of course, yeah.
He had been watching Jevy really carefully. And on the day before we were about to leave, we sat down together, and my dad's one of those staunch South Africans.
Okay.
And he's very rarely emotional. And he actually sat there and he looked at me and he said, I think you're right. And I think there's something quite concerning going on. And I think he could be quite profoundly autistic.
Yes.
And so, obviously.
Was that relief, or was that, obviously a great sense of fear and loss, I'm guessing, or was it more relief?
It was kind of, it's funny to say that it was kind of both. It was kind of nice to know that I wasn't a complete mad woman.
Validating you.
Yes, but it was awful.
Of course.
It was awful in that I think there is so much misinformation, even amongst those of us who think we're knowledgeable in the area of autism.
Yes.
There is so much misinformation out there. So,
do you have any opinion as to why?
Well, I think a lot of people don't talk to autistic people.
Yes.
There's not a lot of time spent asking autistic adults to explain autism. There's a lot of people who are willing to explain it for them.
Yes.
I think
To grab the DSM and just give a diagnostic
Yeah.
outline.
Yeah.
Yes, which is the diagnostic manual, everybody.
Yeah. And I also think that there is a lot of, I think a lot of the time people at the coalface are ignored. So I especially see this in some professional areas, especially law and areas like this where we don't listen to the mothers especially. And I even came across doctors in my time who basically didn't want to listen to what I was telling them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm doing this on the daily
Yeah.
and I'm not a fool.
Yeah.
And I've really rarely come across a mum who is going to doctors worried, who isn't going in the best interests of their child.
And the reality is that the parent is an expert on their child.
Yes.
The parent knows what they're like from waking to sleeping or lack of sleeping.
Yeah.
You know, they know all those micro details that inform the presentation. And so, you know, the psychiatrist, pediatrician, GP, psychologist, you name it, sure, they know their craft, but they're not a specialist on that child until they've spent a lot of time. So it really is a meeting of the minds, and there has to be an absolute valuing of the parent's input.
That's, I and this is why I love you so much, because I know that you do that, and that is an amazing trait. And it's, I think what I would say to anyone listening to this is you've got to look for that in your professionals.
Absolutely.
I have walked out of, you've got to become a warrior, and you've got to become...
Well, you're an advocate,
the
aren't you?
absolute advocate for your child, and you've got to learn to have really thick skin. I've walked out of offices. I've actually refused to pay bills as I walked out because I felt that person had spent no time with my son, had not bothered to carefully look at what was going on and wasn't listening.
Not looking at the individual.
Yeah, and basically had decided from reading paperwork and things like that what was going on. And I felt had completely discounted the actual reality of the situation. And I think you have to get to that point where, and this is really hard because, you know, when you're just the mum or the dad.
There's no such thing as just the mum.
No.
What or just the dad. You know,
No.
what higher profession is there?
Well, that's right. But, you know, you get to that point amongst some of the areas of experts where they're just like, oh, you're just the parent, you know, you don't know these things.
Do you know when people meet me, I'd never tell them I'm a psychologist, ever. I always say I'm a mum of 5 boys.
That explains why you're amazing.
No, but seriously, that's how I value where my place on this planet. It's love. Yeah. It's about what you can, you know, cherish and bring out this gorgeous creature. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I know I got a bit overboard, but yeah. So no, I this just a parent.
I know
you can't get a stronger reaction from me.
It's wrong. It's the wrong words, but that's the feeling you get. Sometimes it's a feeling of. Unfortunately, that is given out that, really, you don't know.
Oh, so tell me, okay, so let's bring it forward in time.
Yes.
So you've got that initial nod from your dad, which would have been very validating. So just sort of like bring us forward in time a bit. How did that next journey go through?
Oh, that next journey was messy. And I know that this happens in a lot of cases where there is a child with autism, and unfortunately the marriage broke down and it was a really messy, acrimonious situation. Sure. And unfortunately also my concern about Devington's autism was used heavily in a legal battle to try and have him removed from me. So I was painted as the overbearing mother, So
this is not a legitimate diagnosis. This is you. This is your agenda.
This is my agenda.
You don't need that.
No. And I know that this happens a lot in the court system. Okay. I'm busy being a mum. I was once a solicitor, and I know it happens a lot. And there is
again handy.
Yeah, you think so, but sometimes knowing too much is not a good thing. And so knowing what was to come was pretty hideous.
Sure.
So we went through nearly 5 years of legal battle, during which time I was stopped because basically the action that was mounted, and I can't go into too much detail obviously with family court stuff, but it has stopped me from doing anything medical unless I got an order from the court.
So you were basically hushed with regard to accessing medical intervention.
Unless I made an application.
Diagnosis and treatment. Now, as you know more than me, with autism, early intervention is very important.
Yep.
So we really like to get kids who are, age 3, 4, we really like to get them into those specialised
like
environments. AEIOU, yeah. And absolutely. So that would have been infuriating.
It was
you couldn't
hideous.
access that. So what age could you jump in? And obviously you won this legal battle.
Yeah, well,
and
the doctors won it.
The doctors won it. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, the
so
doctors.
People at some point listened.
It was amazing. Yeah, I eventually was able to get some orders to go and take Jevington to, much against pretty much everybody in the system. I managed to get some orders to go and take Jevington to an amazing paediatrician who ran the Child Development Network. He doesn't run it anymore, and he was fantastic.
Right.
And he just said to me, wow, you're in a real end game here because they've really done a number. And so he looked at Jevington and he said at the time, look, there is something really, really, really going on here. But I'm not sure if we're dealing, because he's so young, I'm not sure if we're dealing with autism. I'm not sure if we're dealing with more than autism. I'm not sure if
we're talking about intellectual impairment?
Yeah, he thought global developmental delay, actually. Right. He was concerned that Jevington was extremely delayed.
Right.
I didn't agree with that diagnosis because I'd seen Jevington in there. Like there were moments where we connected and I was like, wow, you're there. Yeah. You're not so delayed that you can't interact. I can see that you're there. And I read this really amazing book, The Woman Who Changed Her Brain, about rewiring your neuro pathways.
Sure, yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what? No one's letting me do anything really at this stage. I can't get any of the early intervention that I'm meant to be getting for you. So what I ended up doing was booking myself into experts and saying this is during the process, and I'd only have Jevington 50% of the time, and I would say to them, okay, I can't tell you who the child is, but if I had a child who theoretically did these things, what would I theoretically go and do?
So you went and educated yourself?
Yeah, so I went and educated myself, and then in the 50% of the time that I had Jevington, I started doing all of the early intervention work that I could do with him.
Fantastic.
And then once the court process was over and I had more care, it still wasn't full care, but I had more care of Jevington. I got into really, really, really working with him, but by that time he was 5.
Yeah.
So we'd lost that we hadn't lost it, but we hadn't got that really early area of intervention. And what I would say to parents who are on this journey, if you are able to get that early area of intervention into place, like even if you're just looking at your child and you're thinking, I don't know, get into someone like yourself or yourself. Probably yourself is the best person, but get into someone and just do it because you can't injure your child from doing that.
No. And the process is really interesting because you're able to individualise for the child.
Yes.
You're able to really work on their language skills, and it's not just speaking, it's that self-expression. It's about their ability to reflect on themselves, increase their insight, verbalise.
Yes.
So all of these wonderful skills that helps to unlock them.
Yes.
So crucial, crucial. And, a lot of parents, I can understand that it can be very frustrating because you have to build rapport first. I personally find that I can build rapport pretty quick.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
With difficult people to build rapport with.
Yeah. Sorry, my throat's great today. But, so it's just so important. I completely agree with you. So when did you formally have him diagnosed?
So he was formally diagnosed, actually, once again, thank goodness, Professor Atwood. I finally got to take Jevington to Professor Atwood, and I was very lucky once again. My dad and Professor Atwood had known each other for years, and I was very lucky to get to see Professor Atwood, and Professor Atwood took one look at him and said, this child is clearly autistic.
Yes.
And he went through all of the reasons why he said Jevington was autistic. And at the time, we weren't sure whether he was ASD. So you can explain the levels, but
so everybody, there's autism spectrum disorder, and there's level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is kind of the quirky kid, who can pretty much get on, but they just need a few kind of supports.
Yes.
Level 2 is when we've got significant impact on social capacity, occupational capacity, learning. So they really need very, very clear supports, clear supports. And then we've got level 3, which is what we historically called autism, often nonverbal.
Yes.
And, there's a lot of debate out there that we should have 1.5 and 2.5. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely.
I agree too. And I think, because there's the spectrum is so broad. And
Yes.
I don't think you see any two children who are alike.
No, well, let's talk about that. Autism spectrum disorder is an umbrella term for a whole lot of diagnostic indicators.
Yes.
And so you can have 100 people with autism spectrum disorder and they all present differently. So our mind boggles at this. It's very humbling within the world of psychiatry, psychology, paediatrician world, yes. Absolutely. So tell me about what levels were the conversation with Jevy.
So it was a difficult one. We knew he wasn't 3 because I'd done enough work on him to get him. Initially, he was nonverbal.
So how long was he nonverbal for?
He didn't really start properly talking till 4.
Now that is significant.
Yes. Yeah.
Very significant. So people at that point often start talking about mutism.
Yes.
Selective mutism or just mutism, and it's actually autism spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. And he I used to use flip cards with him to get him to communicate with me, and I'd have lots of visual aids everywhere. So we once spent, except we'd have to work the visual aids out as we went along often. So we once spent 3.5 hours melting down over Uchi Rain. I had no idea what Uchi Rain was when he first learnt to talk. Nutrigrain.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Losing it.
He was saying Uchigrain and you were trying to work out what he meant.
Yeah, Uchi Rain. I want Uchi Rain. And I was like, what? I was pointing to every photo that we had up of everything. Is this it?
He didn't walk to the kitchen and...
No, just lost it and started bashing his head on the floor. And I was like,
darling.
And that this is, how frustrating it must have been for him. And I think, what we've got to learn as parents not to get angry in that moment or upset in that moment because it's really easy to think your child's being naughty.
No.
And it's frustration.
They're locked away.
Yes.
They're locked away. And you're on the same team and you're unlocking them together, but from different vantage points.
That's right.
You're informed, they're not informed.
No.
And the patience for a parent in this is angelic. Angelic, particularly for a single parent who can't tag team, can I say?
No, and it's and even more so too when you're the parent that actually gets it, and you might be co-parenting with a parent that doesn't get it. That can be even more difficult.
Well, you have less control of making sure that the approach is optimal.
Yeah. And we need to have, you need to have that consistency. Autism is one of those things where the more consistent you can be in a lot of ways in terms of, your approach to things, the better it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I found anyway and again, we're generalising because I can only talk from the perspective of my Jevington.
Absolutely.
But I find with him, the more consistent I can be, the calm,
But you know what? That is probably one of the many attributes that is kind of across the board. The need for consistency, the need for routine, their distress with spontaneity, not being adaptive to change. No. That is very classic for the ASD presentation.
Yes. Yeah. And he was confusing in some ways for a lot of the experts, which is why initially they went with global developmental delay because...
Can you explain your understanding of that diagnosis?
The global developmental delay. My understanding of it was that they thought that he was not autistic, but they thought that he had some damage to his brain. That was the initial thing. So they weren't sure whether he had full capacity or any capacity. They weren't sure if he ever would
Yeah, so we're talking about intellectual capacity here.
Yeah. So
and that's what you
huge.
meant before when you said you knew he was in there.
Yeah.
So you had a sense that there was this barrier between your gorgeous boy and the outside world.
Yes.
Whereas when someone has got an intellectual, impairment of some form, that's what they've got to work with. That's
right.
the machinery they've got to work with.
That's right.
Yeah,
And,
so
and
there's
it's different.
Yeah,
very
qualitatively,
different. Yeah.
very different. Absolutely.
And I was convinced. I was like, nah, he is in there. And so I just, and this is the information I would give any parent. I would just say, go and learn from everybody that you can learn from. Read about autism, and if you're not a reader, get and listen to podcasts like this. Listen to all the experts. Book yourself into the experts. If your child doesn't like go and see them yourself. Become your child's advocate, but also become knowledgeable, because the more knowledgeable you can become, the more you can help your child, because after all, you're the adult.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything about where they're at, whereas you can. And I think that there have been, probably when you see the children who are locked in their own heads throughout, the earlier periods of time, if there have been people who actually sat down with them and spent time and did the things that we did with Jeff, we went from not speaking to now, on a topic of his interest, sometimes my ears bleed.
Yeah, and he can really have a good kind of discussion, on a fairly meaningful level, can't he?
Yeah.
And he can debate.
Yeah, he can.
So
he can debate, all right.
He can debate, and he's right.
Yes, he's always right.
Yeah, that could be an issue.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue, and I think
So we've got perspective taking issues. So again, classic ASD trait, perspective taking.
Yeah.
So he is right. He's in his head.
Yeah.
Can we talk about theory of mind for a second?
Yes, that would be great.
Fantastic. Okay, so theory of mind is one of those cornerstones, I think, for ASD. And I love the most simple. I love when science is simple. They just nail it. Yeah. And so the most beautiful, eloquent research design you might know of is a Smartie container.
Yeah.
You've heard of it? Yeah. So the ASD kid is given a Smartie container on a table, and in the they go, kids like fantastic Smarties. So they go up and they find that there's pencils in the Smartie container. They're not happy.
No.
Not happy. And then you say to them, if little Billy comes in and little Billy sees the Smartie container, what does he think is in the Smartie container? And if you do not have theory of mind, then the child will say pencils.
Yeah.
I know it's pencils, so he knows it's pencils. And they can't get into another child or another adult's head and understand they have a different perspective.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So that can very much be missing with ASD, if not across the board. And so when your gorgeous Jevy is right, that's because he is right.
Yeah.
In his mind, he's got the facts. You're wrong. What are you talking about? You're annoying.
Yep. And I think that's where people misinterpret autistic people as not having emotion or not feeling emotion. They just feel it differently.
Yes.
And one of the things that I became quite concerned about is people saying to me, oh, well, of course he doesn't, he doesn't feel other people's emotions. He doesn't feel emotion the same way as other people. And I was like, what a load of nonsense.
Yeah.
I think personally, from watching my son,
expert on your son,
that, and I read a book that was written, oh God, now I'm forgetting the author, but it's called The Boy Who Felt Too Much.
Right.
It was by the man who invented Deep Blue, the computer who could preempt chess moves.
Oh, yeah, John's nodding.
Yeah, anyway, so I'm forgetting his name, which is terrible, but it's called The Boy Who Felt Too Much. And he agrees with me. It's that people with autism actually feel so much of the emotions in a room. They are bombarded. They feel it on a level that we can't even explain. They feel it in their very body.
Yeah.
And so with that, they shut down. They're just like, I can't handle this. So to actually be in a room with people, I need to be.
Well, that's a really interesting concept because, it's nighttime right now, but if we were to look outside during the day, we would categorise that information. We would say, is it day or night? Are the trees short or tall? Yes. Are they dark or light? And we would categorise that information. So our capacity to categorise information is impacted with people with ASD. And they, instead of categorizing, they actually get overwhelmed with all of that individual stimuli that flushes and floods in their head. So they will see all the intricate leaves, all the lights, it just gets overwhelming, which is why they get overwhelmed with stimuli, crowds and everything like that. So when we take that concept and we apply it to emotion in the room, it's a really interesting idea that they actually tap into it all, and they can't make it grey noise, white noise. It might be too flooding. So, I haven't heard that theory. It's a very interesting theory.
Wagner, I think it is. That's how you pronounce it, maybe. That's terrible. But it's just, I think, from watching my son in particular. So, for example, if he sees a really emotional part in a film, he'll fast forward it.
Well, let's come to your gorgeous dog.
Yes.
Sky.
Yeah.
Now, I've met gorgeous Sky on a couple of occasions, and the bond and the affection between him and this gorgeous dog shows a lot of emotion.
Yeah. They have an amazing bond.
So Sky is a white pig dog.
She would take exception to that. She thinks she's gorgeous. She's a bull.
It's not the fluffy dog you expect.
No, she's an English bull terrier. So that's all right.
Is that the same?
People call them pig dogs. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, but she's an English.
I just did.
Yeah, that's all right. That's just what she looks like.
Sorry.
So she's not your usual kind of fluffy companion dog. But gosh, she loves him. And from the moment we brought her home, it was like...
So she was a rescue dog?
Yeah, she was a rescue dog. We rescued her. She was on death row. So we brought her home, and she just took one look at Jeb and went, "This is my person." Yeah. And he just took one look at her and went, This is my girl. Yeah. And their relationship is so beautiful. I have a photo of them, and I'll probably have to get it for you so you can put it up with this, but he was actually sleeping on the couch, and later on I heard her grunting and moaning, and I thought, what is she doing? And I came out, and he had rolled off the couch, and she'd gone underneath him and was holding him up. So he's fast asleep, half off the couch, and the dog's underneath him, holding him up, stopping him from falling on the floor. And I could hear her, she's like, "Oh God, I don't know how much stupid human, come and help." So I came and I picked him up off her, but she had stopped him from falling on the floor.
And you've told me other examples as well where she's actually grabbed him by the backpack.
Yes,
or from the hoodie.
And so he was on some play equipment, and he was, one of those sort of singular seesaws, and he was going on it so hard, and I was about to go over and pull him off because I thought he was going to bash his head on the ground.
Yes. I really do.
Those singular. Anyway, before I even had a chance, Sky had bolted over there, grabbed him by the back of the hoodie, and had dragged him off.
Really?
This thing, and she just
that's enough, buddy.
Yeah, she looked at me as if to say, "Really? I had." Were you going to do anything?
So you have a co-parent?
I do. I have a co-parent. She's a bull terrier.
And what does
she thinks I'm inept?
What does he do to show relating to her?
Oh, he cuddles. She gets overloved. So
is he cuddly with you?
He chooses. So we have a system with cuddles.
You have a system with cuddles. Okay.
So we have grades of cuddles, which go from level 1 to level 10.
Right.
And so we had to work these out over time. So level 1 is very soft, kind of pat. And if he's at a level 1 cuddle stage, you might get a face plant if you try to a face plant. So he'll put his hand over your face and push you away.
So he'll push you away if you go for a hug, right?
Yeah. So that's your level 1 cuddles. It's sort of become a bit of a joke between us. Like, I'm like, "Am I coming in for the face plant?" And he's like, "Probably." And through to level 5, which is, so each cuddle gets a bit harder. And then when I know we're really having issues with our proprioceptive system.
Can you explain that for the audience?
Okay, so most of us know where we are in space and time because of our proprioceptive system. So I know I'm sitting in this chair because my proprioceptive system is telling me I'm sitting down and I'm nice and steady here.
Yeah. So where you are in space.
Yeah. So for Jevington and for a lot of children with autism, that system, for whatever reason, doesn't activate in the same way. So they will seek sensory movement to try and help their body know where they are in terms of space and time. So Jevington is exceptionally sensory. He's a real sensory seeker. So some kids are sensory avoiders,
Yes.
and some kids are sensory seekers. And Jev can swing. So this is the inconsistency of autism. He can swing from being a sensory, so avoiding anything sensory, hence me getting face planted if I try to hug him.
Yes.
To real sensory seeking, which might be throwing himself at the couch over and over again, kicking a wall over and over again, rolling around on the floor, setting up his pillows so he can run into them and smack into them over and over again. So
he's really getting a sense of his own body by the contact that he has with the environment.
Exactly.
Does he do that with you?
Yes. Yes.
You're lucky you're a very fit person.
I know, isn't it? So he likes to jump on me a lot from a running leap. So that's been one of the reasons I spend
He's
so
getting
much time.
taller. He's getting older. That's not great. Really discourage that one.
I know. So I have to actually say to him, look, let's find another way of dealing with this.
Yeah.
He also likes to wear wetsuits. So
Does he?
Yeah, he loves them.
So is that a bit like a weight blanket?
Yeah, like a weight blanket. He doesn't funnily enough, he's not real keen on weight blankets.
Well, you can't pick it, can you?
No, you can't. I thought he would be. So this is the thing. You think you can...
It's all trial and error.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no way of predicting.
Whereas we love wetsuits, and we wear wetsuits. We went through...
When do you wear wetsuits? Around the house, the shops?
Whenever we feel like it.
I've seen you out for sushi. He wasn't wearing one that time.
He's got better at that. He'll wear it underclothes sometimes now. So
That is fantastic.
Yeah. We went through a stage where we wore a wetsuit and motorcycle boots, age 5, for pretty much 2 months straight. And I used to have to fight him to get the motorcycle boots off.
At least you could wash him. Drips dry.
But drying him after a shower with the wetsuit on to get him to bed, because you couldn't take the wetsuit off. He had to shower in the wetsuit. So I'd have to blow dry him.
Are you serious?
No,
so
I'm
you're blow
completely-
drying a wetsuit for him to then sleep in the wetsuit?
Yeah.
Didn't he get all wrinkly?
Yep.
But he was happy.
He was happy. And the way I have
So
it...
wonderfully random.
I know.
You've got me.
I love it.
There's my memory for the night.
I love it. And
I'm such a visual person.
Yeah.
I'm going right there.
Oh, he was in a wetsuit when I left tonight.
Was he?
He was in... So he loves... So I took that concept a little bit further, and I got him a heap of morph suits.
What's a morph suit?
So the morph suits are like the full lycra bodysuits with even you see people running in them sometimes and things like that for fun runs and stuff, and you can pull it right over your head, and it's like a full...
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so we used to not like going to the shops, so I thought, well...
So you take him to the shops wearing that?
Yeah.
Oh, you're awesome.
Not now. He doesn't do it so much. Like, he'll wear it under clothes and he'll pull their head. But for ages, when he was younger, he'd just go in a morph suit. So his concept was people couldn't see him, so he can... I think we spend so much time putting an adult concept into a child's mind of what they should be like,
Yeah.
We so desperately want our kids to fit in and be normal,
Yeah.
whatever normal is.
Yeah.
But we say, you can't let your child wear a wetsuit for 2 months. Why not?
Yeah, well, he's
Why
happy.
not? We're not having a meltdown. Our proprioceptive system seems to like it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a pain blow drying your child every night, but,
Yeah. Well, I'd love to ask you about special interests because, people with ASD have special interests. And this is a really interesting to your previous link because I've had a lot of clients where the kid might love Thomas the Tank Engine, but, he's 11 and the parents are saying, well, look, this is not age appropriate. And they're trying to make the ASD child fit into the neurotypical world.
Yeah,
And
don't do that.
No, respect the child. This is their passion. This is their interest. Okay, if you want to dress them, if you can sneak stuff in without them being too distressed, no problem. But don't make them fit the mould.
No, and I think...
So does Jeff have special interests?
Oh, yeah. So he loves this show called Ladybug and Cat Noir, which is a French, I think...
of course, it's a free watch.
It's in English, but they're French superheroes. They're very French. Their outfits are amazing and things like that. But
Are they lycra suits?
yeah, of course they are. I don't know how this is going to bode for us in adult life, but we're going to have fun. Yeah, I'm up for it. So that he really loves. And he actually said to me tonight, Mum, I'm really worried about what other kids will think if they know that I love Ladybug and Cat Noir because it's a real, like, little kid show. And I said to him, but I love Ladybug and Cat Noir.
Yeah.
And he's like, and how old are you, Mum? I'm like, I'm ancient. I'm 42. And I love them. And he was like, and I said, so anyone has a problem with that, you can go and say, my mum, who's 42, and cool, by the way.
But isn't that interesting that he's starting to say, what are other people thinking?
Yes.
He's becoming more socially aware.
Yes.
I was chatting with him the other day about him not, the issue of where was safe places to play at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And he was aware that other people had different opinions to him as to their priorities at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, hello,
Amazing,
perspective taking. We're making some movement here.
And I think that's the importance of talking to your child on the level.
You've got to join them
Yeah,
where they're
you've got to
at.
join them.
And then just slowly, gently, just sort of like, pull that apart because the thing about ASD kids, amongst many, is that you can't prescribe anything to them. Anything that they're going to work with has to become their knowledge, their insight in that moment, and then they take it as their own, and you get no credit at all.
No.
No.
Don't expect any credit.
No. And so that's why you've really got to just join them wherever they're at and work from there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I agree. And I think, that comes back to the issue that you have when you deal with the neurotypical world. The neurotypical world prescribes that.
what do you call them, Gen Pop?
I call them Gen Pop.
The general, what is
general
it?
population.
The Gen Pop.
Gen Pop. Like in a prison, you've got Gen Pop. Well, I figure,
you?
yeah.
Didn't know that.
Criminal law.
Okay.
But yeah, so you've got Gen Pop in prison. So I see the schooling system as a bit like that. So we've got, we've got the neuro. Jebby and I break it down, and I think that you have to have humour. And I think, and one thing that someone said to me when they were dealing with Jeb was, he's confusing because he has amazing humour.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, he does. But that's because we've always dealt with everything by way of humour. Him and I laugh at things, and it's really important, I think. We'll go, if there was a meltdown in the supermarket or something, I was like, well, that went well, and we'll just look at each other and absolutely burst out laughing, and he'll
break the tension.
Yeah, and he'll be like, "It really didn't, Mum."
You also discuss with him complex issues.
Yes.
I've heard you talk about, I can't quite remember if it was environmental issues or social issues. I don't know if it was political. I can't quite remember, but I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is a great conversation for any parent and child of his age, let alone a kid with ASD. And, and he thinks on that level, and he will come and throw out these wonderful critical thoughts.
Yeah. He asked me how to split the atom the other day.
Did he?
I was like...
Oh, you let him down, didn't you?
I did. Oh. I showed him what a fool his mother actually was. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's how you make an atom bomb, and that's why they didn't teach me how to do it. He's like, well, I want to know. And I thought, oh, my God. Jimmy's plan to rule the universe.
Split the atom.
Yeah. Oh. So I said to him, we'll have to look that up. But I actually think... So he loves Google. He loves the internet. Like many kids, again, I'm speaking from my perspective with Jev and girlfriends who also have kids with autism, but they really like computer-based things.
Yes.
And I think, and you'll be able to give more insight into that, but I think it's because it is something that is always going to do exactly pretty much what they want it to do.
Well, it's very mathematical,
yeah, it's very,
isn't it?
yeah.
It's formula-based.
Yep.
There's right, there's wrong, there's a formula, we can carry it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they love it. And so I have always felt with Jev that he's going to learn about the world the way he's going to learn about the world, not the way I want him to learn about the world, not the way the neurotypical people want him to learn about the world. So I've always just gone, okay, well, let's look on Google.
Right.
We just Google stuff.
So he searches a lot of Google.
Yeah.
And also his future is going to be a reflection of him, isn't it? And it's not going to be following any neurotypical pathway.
No.
And, we talked earlier about it. There can be a point of grief for a parent to not have a typical trajectory for their child.
Yeah.
But once you get on board and say, okay, it's an adventure, let's just see where we go.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It is. And it was something that I really had to come to terms with. And I had a moment I think it was my mum. She's a real earth mother. She's amazing. She said, well, you didn't turn out like I thought you would.
Yeah.
And she said, so why do you think that Jevington should be what you thought he should be?
I turned out exactly the way my mother thought I would.
Clearly my mother had me pegged for something.
She said you always had a mind of your own. Nothing would happen unless it was your priority. She had me pegged. Hilarious.
Well, that's good.
You should talk to her.
Yeah, I love her.
Classic.
I love her. She's amazing.
She is, isn't she?
Yeah,
she's a crack.
Yeah, we always have a chat. But yeah, I think it was in that moment that I kind of went to myself, you know what? Yeah. I'm grieving for something that never existed. So I'm grieving for the ideology of a child that never existed.
A concept.
It was a concept.
Yeah.
It was, my child's going to do this and they're going to go to school and who's going to be good at soccer and whatever. I don't know. I don't even really know what I thought. And I guess what has been lucky for me is I have only got the one child and he's autistic. So I don't know what it's like to be the child of a neurotypical the mother of a neurotypical child.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like. So I've kind of become this mother of a non-neurotypical child, and it's trying, I must admit, because I am neurotypical. Well, my mother questions that as well, but
You are.
Yeah. I am. And so there's a lot that doesn't make sense to me all the time. But I figure, with even a neurotypical child, there's going to be a lot to that child that doesn't make sense to you all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm just like, well, you got to roll with the punches, and you've got to empower your child to be themselves.
And can I just make a really interesting point that I've only recently come upon? I came across a family where they really didn't acknowledge their child's disability, and they very much mainstreamed and they very much normalised, and their point was, my child's not going to have restrictions, which, I understand absolutely.
Yeah.
Their bigger
Mentality,
picture.
yeah.
But the truth is their child did have restrictions. He isn't ASD, but he's very similar in his presentation. And the truth is his intellectual capacity is very limited. His social capacity is very limited. This is someone who can't count money. He's very limited. And so his experience wasn't embracing his difference. It was actually, you should be the same. And so now he's an adult, and he is in denial, resenting his difference and trying to fit into the neurotypical world, or the intellectually fluent, and is crashing and is falling and feeling inadequate, and it's not embracing. So I really love this idea of embracing the reality of it, working with it. Do you see my point?
Yeah. Well, I agree. A fish doesn't climb a tree.
There you go.
It can't.
Another gem.
Yeah, I know. And so why are we asking our fish to climb trees?
Yeah.
It's not going to do well.
Celebrate that point of
Celebrate
difference.
it. And that's where when I hear parents saying, I don't want my child to have a diagnosis, I don't want them living with that for the rest of their lives. So I'm like, so you want them to live with the fact that they don't fit in, that they feel unworthy because they see such a point of difference, that people give them a hard time for it, and that when they get to adulthood, they have so many complex issues as a result of that, that they're going to spend half their life feeling inadequate.
Yeah.
Jevy and I talk about it all the time, and I say to him, I think that your purpose in life is to change the world in relation to how people feel about autism. And I feel like we're seeing a rise of autistic people because there is a need for neurodivergence in this world. We've had too much of this normalisation of things, whatever that actually means.
Yeah.
And we need some neurodivergent thought.
Well, have you heard Tony Atwood say that he thinks the ASDs are going to take over the world?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and he himself says that he has ASD.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic.
I think and he's amazing. Like, watching him with Jev for about 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm so inadequate.
Can I recommend anyone listen to Tony Atwood, Professor Tony Atwood, talk on Conversation Hour with Richard Feidler?
That's amazing.
Because his personal sharing is really rich.
Yeah, and I think, there's a few people like yourself who are neurotypical autism whisperers. And
I do speak autism.
you do.
I do.
I know. Jevy loves it.
Yeah.
He's like, she gets me. I'm like, again, I feel inadequate.
No.
But I think, we need to, there is this need in parents for their children to be normal. And I hate that word because I don't know what it means for starters. Like, please explain.
I've never considered myself normal.
I'm really not.
No, overrated, doesn't exist.
I don't want to
Throw that away.
And I love that Jevington is his own person. And I actually, what devastates me is when he gets bullied for that and that gets crushed.
Yeah.
That devastates me. And what I would say to any parent out there listening who perhaps doesn't have a neurodivergent child but is listening because they have their kids have friends who have autism or they're just listening, if your child is being cruel to a child who's different, that is up to you as a parent to re-educate your child.
Absolutely.
Because our children behave as they see. So we need to re-educate our children about embracing all sorts of things, like embracing things that are different, strange, weird, because the world would be so much better if we did.
And I'm loving that Mother Tiger's speaking.
Well, I love it. I think if you want to wear a wetsuit to Coles, I'll wear a wetsuit with you, mate.
You'll have to come scuba diving with us. Do you think you would?
I think he would.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, my God, he loves all sorts of things. He'd probably research it for 10 months and talk your head off.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, we had better wrap up. Yeah. Darling, I have really genuinely enjoyed this conversation.
It's a great chat.
There's so much more we could talk about, but we better go. Let me tell everyone how they can find me.
Yes.
I'm not getting that much better at this. Okay. You can find me on KirstenHunterAuthor.com, Facebook, Kirsten Hunter Author, and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, Twitter, Kirsten Hunter AU, my YouTube channel, Psych in Your Car, and this podcast is Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. Thank you so much for coming, Katherine.
Thank you for having me. It's been fantastic.
It's been fun.
I love unravelling autism.
There you go. See you, darling.
See ya.